I'm Miwa Messer. I'm the producer and host of Poured Over, and I've been reading Alexis Okeowo's byline in the New Yorker now for almost a decade. And it took me a minute to think about that because I feel like I've always been reading you, and yet at the same time, I am never bored when I see your byline. And you write a lot for the magazine. And we have your new book, Blessings and Disasters, which is the kind of narrative nonfiction I love. And frankly, I want to get on a plane right now and go to Alabama, which honestly, yes, it's a place I've wanted to go. The EJI is there. There's some great art. There's a lot of American history there. But now, having read Blessings and Disasters, I'm like, I need to hang out with these people. I need to be in this place because I have such a firm sense of this place that I've never been to because of your book. But also, your book got me texting with a cousin in California last night. Your book had me thinking about a weekend I just spent in New England, in both Connecticut and Massachusetts, because the sense of place is so strong. And when you come from places that have a really strong sense of place, like Alabama or California or Massachusetts or Connecticut, right? It's a trip to meet these people. And I'm so excited to meet you, Alexis. Thank you for making the time.
Well, I'm so excited to be here. Yeah, thank you for having me.
So 2017, you start reporting on Alabama, where you grew
Yes.
up, but you're going back as a journalist, and that is a completely different equation. You are not, I mean, maybe you're seeing friends from high school and maybe you're seeing relatives and whatnot, but at the same time, you're there to tell a story about your people.
Yeah, it was interesting. I didn't know I was going to write a book about Alabama. Most of my
Okay.
career has been focused about writing abroad, writing about
Yeah, yeah.
Africa and America. And then there was the sensation I had after the presidential election in 2016 when
Right.
Trump was elected, where people started talking about the South in a way that I both recognized and didn't recognize.
Mm-hmm.
It started to arouse these feelings of me, of feeling misunderstood, like as a person from this place. And yeah, feeling protective of a place that I thought had a lot of problems and a lot of, advantages as well. And
Mm-hmm.
thinking, if no one else is going to try to explain it, how about me?
Can we start with the title, Blessings and Disasters?
Hmm.
I mean, you talk about it in the book, so it's not like I'm asking you to, give up too much in this case. But one, I love the title, and I love the idea behind the title, but it's also a little eye-catching.
Yes, I mean, if you've heard anything about the South, we love to say blessed, bless your heart. That's a blessing. Everything's a blessing.
Hmm.
But I mean, the irony, right, is that a lot of things aren't, and that
Right.
I feel like the border between blessing and disaster is very fine
Hmm.
and easily tipped over, depending on where you are at any
Yeah.
point. So I thought it best represented this state where some of the worst and best things in American history have happened.
Well, and also partially too, we meet a lot of folks in the book too who are so intent on being polite to each
Mm.
other. And it really actually makes me think of being in Japan a lot, where everyone just must be polite, must maintain face. Everyone must be polite. No one wants to hurt anyone's feelings. And someone could be saying no to you just as they're saying, yes, of course, we'd be delighted to do that. And it's like, actually, oh, that's a really big no. That is a serious no right there. And it's wild to me how much that behavior still carries through, even when you know your shared history.
Absolutely. And even when you're talking about, what, as we would say in the South, the ugliest things,
Hmm.
there's still this desire to sort of be polite, to be nice,
Hmm.
and to sort of still have that, shared, that shared politeness, even though we don't agree on anything.
But also, some of the interviews you do, and I want to go to the structure of the book for a second because I love the way you structured it. We meet three people first. Meet the leader of a native tribe. We meet a Civil War reenactor, and then a woman whose family comes from a long line of activists. And then we move into a separate section, and you use people as transitions too. Like the way you move from one section to another, you never lose sight of the people. So we've got Stephanie, Calvin, and Mary, and then we add Tina, and then we come
Mhm.
back to Stephanie, we
Mhm.
add Brandon, and we come
Mhm.
back to Tina. And I loved this cross section of people. They were not, I didn't know what to expect, honestly. I just figured you would go find interesting people to talk to because I've read your journalism in the New Yorker. But I love sort of how you bring us in. And I want to ask why we start with Stephanie. I mean, I have a pretty good idea, but I think she's
Yeah.
groovy.
No, well, so I wanted to structure the book in a sense as a history, an alternate
Mhm.
history, I'm calling it.
Right.
But I wanted to do it in a lively, engaging, interesting way.
Hmm.
So if we're starting with where Alabama began, it was Indian territory, Creek
Right.
territory. And so who around from that group still exists? And it turns out there's this small, thriving tribe of Creek people, and their head is their first female chief.
Yeah.
And I thought, and you know, as I was come to discover, a very powerful figure, both as a representative and as a person. And I thought this is where we have to start because, in a way, she represents the complications of Alabama I'm trying to drive home, which is that
Hmm.
she is this Native American chief, but she's also very Alabamian. She's proud to be Alabamian. She's Native and Southern, which is something we don't think about a lot.
Hmm. Well, that's something you use in a way to describe yourself. I mean, you talk about being Southern first and American second. And, you know, there are old New England habits that I try to shake. And, you know, I still, mostly it comes out in language and not necessarily an accent, but I'll say things like down the Cape or wicked is a word I have not been able to excise from my vocabulary. It's just apparently never going to happen. I tried really hard, but little things like that. But even, you know, just being grounded to a place, right?
Yeah,
Like Stephanie, yeah, when you say she's an Alabamian, oh yeah. Oh,
you're right.
without a doubt, she is grounded. She's grounded in this place through her family, through the culture, but also simply by sheer will, right?
Yes, yes. And that sheer will is, I think, something that unites Alabamians
Hmm.
because Alabama's not an easy place to
Nope.
have stuck around for various reasons. Either it's wanting to push you out, or it's become difficult for you, or whatever. But the people I spend time with, and even in talking to my parents, that they all sort of stayed around for
Hmm.
different reasons, mainly because it's home to them,
Right.
and that took will.
When did you leave Alabama again? You left for college, but I
I
can't.
left at 18, yeah.
Okay. All right. So it's been a minute since you've lived there full time, and there are a couple of points in the
Exactly.
book where you're like, I was always getting on a plane back to New York.
Yes.
But it also strikes me that you carry Alabama around with you the way I carry New England around with me.
Yes.
Like you kind of can't shake it. You kind of can't, kind of don't want to. So I think of place in sort of four different ways, right? There's the physical, there's the historical, there's the
Mm,
social, and then
mm,
there's the nostalgic,
mm.
right? Like a New England beach in November, love, totally
Yeah.
love. You know,
Yeah.
have fond memories of like, you know, sailing in weird moments and stuff like that. But I can't separate that place from its history.
Yeah.
And if anyone knows the history of Boston, it doesn't have the cleanest record in a lot of ways. It is a much different place now than it was when I was growing up. And I think
Right.
we can say the same about you in Alabama.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because when you're growing up, or when I was growing up, I was aware of the history, of course, because,
Hmm.
right, Alabama is a place where the past does always feel present in certain ways. But it's something, its history is something I continue to grapple with as I get older, not only
Hmm.
because I'm learning parts of it I didn't know, but also because I'm reminded of it by people who are not Alabamians,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it's a place that is defined by its history, for
right,
better or worse. These days, probably worse.
right. I mean, poll tax is in place until 1965 with the Voter Rights Act. I mean, there's the Clotilde. Oh, actually, you know what? Can we
Hmm.
talk about Africatown for a second? Because I think there might be some folks who don't know this story, and it really does intersect with the Creeks and sort of sets us up for present day Alabama. But
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of folks know the story of the Clotilde, which you do bring into this book.
Yeah. I mean, Africatown, yeah. So basically, the Clotilda was one if I'm not mistaken, it was the last. Well, the Clotilda's a ship,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it was a
sorry.
slave ship sent by two Alabama brothers to the west coast of Africa for one last slave run. The domestic slave trade, um, or actually, sorry, the international slave trade had been banned. They
Hmm.
did it legally. They brought back a group of dozens of enslaved people. This was about 5 years before the Civil War.
Hmm.
Um, and then, you know, 5 or so years later, those enslaved people were free and had to make a life in Alabama.
Right,
They had a recent memory of their home in Africa, but they couldn't find a way to get back there.
right.
So they had to make a life in this strange southern place. And they did that on the Gulf Coast in a town
Right.
called Mobile. And their descendants still live there.
Hmm.
And it's you're right. It's a story like the Creek, like this group that became part of the American Union. They didn't want to be, but
Hmm.
their survivors stayed on, and by will, by sheer force, made a home of it.
I mean, part of it too, as I'm going through, and so I've read the book twice now. Read it just in one sitting, just because I needed to sort of have that. Let's put it this way: it took longer to read the book than it typically takes to read one of your pieces. So it was more
Yeah.
immersive. It was also surprising in a lot of ways. Like, I mean, when I think about like the Daughters of the American Revolution, right? Like that's the New England version of the Daughters of the United Confederacy, but like both were building monuments and making sure that stories got told in a certain way and whatnot. And I'm like, oh, there really is a direct line
Yes.
between sort of, because when you grow up in the North, you're taught all of these stories about the South, right? And like, well, we don't do that. And it's like, well, actually, we do. We just call it something different, right? So to see all of these points pop in a narrative of a place that I have not physically been to, but still feels familiar in a lot of
Mm,
ways, was really a treat. And yeah, I keep coming back to the people, but I also keep coming back to you because you give us just enough of your life where you're like, and then my parents would not let me do this. And I'm like, oh, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that part. Yep. You're not allowed. And it's like, oh.
yeah.
You had a couple of brothers, and I'm gonna guess your brothers had a tiny bit more freedom maybe than you
Oh
did.
my God. I have two younger brothers and they could do anything they wanted.
Okay, so I have a younger brother too, and I always called it the boy child hypocrisy problem because I'm like, hi, excuse me, what? Hi, I'm apparently paving the way
Yes, I paved
for
the way. You paved the way.
complete. It's that first daughter thing where you're just like, oh, okay, I will get the
Mhm.
grades and I will do the things, and apparently I will be told no a lot, which, you can make up for that later in other ways. But how did it feel, though, to do this kind of reporting, this in depth reporting that you have done overseas
Yeah.
and, deeply reported pieces, but you've kind of also got to kick away some of the stuff that you believed to be true or had experienced. I mean, when you're reporting on your own life and your family's life,
Yeah.
your parents sound like very cool cats, but at the same time, also very strict. I was like, oh, I really recognize these people.
I mean, it was interesting because it was uncomfortable. It was
Right,
uncomfortable because I knew when I started, okay, this is my home state, but
right.
I'm not going to be in it. It's about this place, these people, how naive I was. Of course it's about me. Of course it's
Hmm.
about my experience as well. And yeah, it was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable thinking about the past and trying to be honest about it. Because I was like, people would be able to tell if I'm not being honest.
Right,
So I was trying to be honest and I was trying to dig into the discomfort and all the contradictions. And some of it was fun too, but
right.
I do remember a lot of the discomfort.
How did you get your parents to talk, though? Because I feel like they really, or at least I know more about your parents than I was expecting to be able to come away from, because I have
Yeah,
met parents like yours.
yeah.
Like, how did you get them to talk?
I think they didn't realize how much I would be including, to be honest. I
Okay,
mean, I did tell them I was interviewing them, but I think it's one thing to just chat about your life and then also
right.
and to see it. Um, but I think especially their experience as college students in Alabama, because
Hmm.
that's parents met was in college in Alabama during such a tricky time. It's like the
Yeah.
tail end of the civil rights movement. They were at a historically Black college.
Hmm.
They were not fitting it at all. They were Black, but they were foreign.
Hmm.
So it was a tricky time for them. And I think there was an unease with,
Right.
they're easy talking about that too.
I mean, your dad was going to be a pilot, and then he was like, no, thanks. I think I'd rather be a professor, which I really appreciate that story. Your
Mhm.
mom was thinking, oh, I'm going to go back to Nigeria at some point,
Yeah.
but then also studies journalism. Wait, no, your mom was going to go back to Nigeria to work in TV or something like that, and then was like, I guess I'm staying.
Exactly. And so, right, staying in Alabama was not the plan.
Right.
My mom was going to go back, work at a TV network.
Hmm.
Um, my dad, I think was also just coming to study, and
Right.
then they developed friends and they had their community and got degrees, and it became home.
I mean, that's the biggest piece for me, I think, that I was taking away from the book is not just sort of how much the history of any one place hangs over any of us, but it's like you can build community wherever you are, however you are. And yeah, it takes a minute for everyone to build, but it's possible, right? Like your parents were a little shocked that they weren't connecting with their classmates, but that's to me, that's sort of the newish immigrant, not necessarily being understood by
Mm,
the community in which they land, right? And then you introduce us to this kid, Brandon, later
yeah.
in the book, who he's a DACA kid.
Yes.
He's a DACA kid, and but he has a life and he's an Alabamian. Like he is, yeah, he's a DACA kid, but he is absolutely tried and true. And his brother, both of them, Alabamians. And how did you meet Brandon?
Brandon, I love Brandon so much. Brandon has a much stronger Southern accent than me, by the way. If you heard
That's funny.
Brandon,
Okay, that's funny.
I'm like, whoa, you're more Alabama than I am. Uh,
Hmm.
I met him because not long after I started this book, there was not long before I started it, there
Mm,
was a wave of anti-immigration
yeah.
legislation through the country trying to get immigrants to so-called self-deport. And
Hmm.
Alabama passed a bill that was very harsh. It was targeting Latino migrants. And he was only in high school at the time
Hmm.
and had come out and was protesting and giving speeches, and he's
Hmm.
undocumented. And I was later linked up with him just to sort of see what he was like. And I was
Hmm.
just surprised at how well spoken he was
Yeah.
and unafraid. And also just how, yeah, Alabamian he was.
I love the idea that this dude has a Southern accent. I mean, it's of course, why wouldn't he? But at some point in the book too, you talk about how the Mexican population went from negligible, statistically, unrecordable, and exploded 140% because of agriculture.
Absolutely. I
And
mean,
I was like, that's a wild, no, 140% growth. And we've seen that in the Midwest too, with poultry
exactly.
factories and pork producers in the South, like populations change because not everyone is willing to do the kind of heavy lifting that goes into this kind of work. And so when you see the changing demographics of America and who's taking these jobs and who's willing to do these jobs, um, it's, yeah, I'm looking at my country right now saying, huh, here we are.
And not even just doing those jobs, but revitalizing these rural areas and small
Mm-hmm.
towns. All of
Mm-hmm.
a sudden there's life in these places again because of these migrants,
Yeah,
their families.
exactly. Exactly. But on the flip side of Brandon, we've got Tina, whose family has been there since time began.
Hmm.
I had remembered the story you'd done about her in the New Yorker too, because Roy Moore pops
Yeah.
up obviously in her story, and we're not going to go into all of the details because I think it's really important the way she's presented and the way her narrative sort of flows alongside Mary McDonald's narrative as well. Um, but Tina's experience of Alabama is deep in her family. Her mother, she's the product of a teenage pregnancy, and she also had a child when she was a teenager, and this sort of cycle that some folks may think of when they think of rural America and whatnot. And her story obviously changes quite a lot when Roy Moore enters the picture. But she didn't, it wasn't that she didn't trust you right away. She just, you were a stranger in her house.
Yes. So going back to this idea of going to home and
Yeah.
reporting
Mm-hmm.
and dealing with also my preconceptions or my biases that had developed
Okay.
over the years.
Yeah.
So when I was younger growing up, I let's my view of race relations, I
Mm-hmm.
think, growing up was not as sort of stratified as it is now because
Okay.
I had friends of different races. I went to a very diverse school. I was used to
Mm-hmm.
being over at people's houses of different races. As an adult, going to visit Tina, we've never met before. I know she's a white woman living in rural northern Alabama.
Right.
I'm thinking now, is she going to be uncomfortable that I'm coming to her house as a black woman because she doesn't know I'm black? So
Mm-hmm.
I get to her house, she's a little frosty. And then, to my embarrassment, I realize her new husband is black, and so are all of her stepchildren,
Right.
and she's just like uncomfortable because I'm a journalist.
Right. Right.
And then I felt very schooled in a really nice way. I was like, okay, Alexis, this is a lesson for you.
And wow, you get her to talk though. You get her to. I'm just going to ask people to read those sections of the book, and really, you get her to talk in ways that surprise me. And yes, I understand what you do for a living, but
Mhm.
I have also met women like Tina who weren't necessarily from rural northern Alabama. I think it's partially a generational thing. I think it's
Mhm.
absolutely a generational thing. I think we all had a moment with Me Too where it was like, oh, finally, we're just going to deal with this. Hurrah, go girls. Let's do all of it. And that seems to have not been how it all panned out. But at the same time, I think we all had that moment where it's like, yeah, finally, we're going to deal with this as a culture and a society. And she was part of that.
Yes.
Mary McDonald. And I am kind of bouncing around a little
No.
bit in the way you've structured this book. And I love the flow of the writing, and I love the flow of the narrative. And I feel very attached to all of the people you're writing about.
Love it.
Um, but how did you meet Mary?
Oh, Mary, we actually came together over a New Yorker story I was
Okay.
reporting before that was about a sewage crisis in the Black Belt. There's a wastewater crisis happening there and happening in much of rural America.
Hmm.
And Mary was recruited by researchers to sort of interview her neighbors about what was going on with their homes. And
Hmm.
we had met only briefly, but I
Hmm.
had kept her number. And I can't remember how it came up again, but I just thought I want to spend time with someone in the Black Belt because the Black Belt is such an important part of Alabama
Hmm.
and the South, and I knew she lived there. And after a call or two, she agreed to have me over. And that's when I fully discovered the extent of her story. I didn't
Right.
realize her legacy.
Right. Um, we should explain the black belt though,
Yeah.
because I think people know intellectually that Alabama is really, really fertile ground, but I don't think they quite know also what climate change has done
Yes.
to the state. And I think the black belt really does represent that. So could you just bring us into that a little more?
Sure. Yeah. The Black Belt is this incredibly fertile um, region of land that runs through Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, Louisiana. And during, pre-Civil War, this was the prime land for cotton plantations. That's where they thrived. Now that dense soil is creating a lot of problems for its residents, a lot of whom are the descendants of enslaved people who worked
Hmm.
on the plantations, a lot of whom own land. And because of climate change, there's more rainfall. The soil is not absorbing the water. Sewage often backs up into people's homes, people's trailers, because in rural America, there's often not adequate plumbing systems. And so, yeah, you have a wastewater crisis that really is still ongoing. Um, it's really, and which has caused, the resurgence of tropical parasites, hookworm.
That is the wildest. I'm sorry. We're talking about diseases that we've actually eradicated around the world, and suddenly they're popping up again in Alabama. Like, this
Absolutely.
is. the wildest piece of information to me. It's like, wait a minute, wait a minute. We're living in the 21st century. Like, literally, diseases that have been eradicated are
Yes.
back.
Yes. Someone from the UN visited and said he had never seen this kind of poverty, even in the
Mhm.
third world,
Yeah.
these kind of conditions, which is insane. And so it's frustrating, people like Mary's families,
Hmm.
they own their house, their land. It's such an accomplishment after, Civil War, after the legacy of the Civil
Hmm.
War construction. And then now there's this environmental crisis.
And they're tied to, the houses and their land being sort of representative, right, of freedom and the absolute symbol. But they're also tied to these places now in ways that they can't escape because there is no resale value. No one is coming to give you money to buy that house. You can't leave. It's really expensive. It can cost $30,000 to put in new treatment, any kind of sewage treatment on your own property. And that's more than some people make in a year. Like, it's really expensive to be poor. And we're not having those conversations. And that's not limited to the Black Belt, right? Like,
No,
it's
all
just
over
not.
America,
Yeah,
all over
exactly.
America.
And we haven't figured out a way as a culture and as a society and as a country how to address these problems in a way that's scalable. Because
Yes.
again, it isn't just one community.
Yes. And the problem so far, right, has been like it's individual responsibility. If you don't
Hmm.
figure out a plumbing solution,
Hmm.
you'll be fined or arrested,
Yeah.
which is crazy.
And that just adds to the fines and that adds to the debt, and it keeps rolling over onto itself. And instead of finding solutions, we're just collectively kind of throwing up our hands and saying, well, what are we supposed to do? And it's like, well, actually, we should be helping our neighbors.
Yes.
And again, this isn't just limited to Alabama. It is, I mean, think about Flint, Michigan. The pipes are finally clean
Exactly.
in Flint, Michigan, and it took, what, 10 years to fix and swap out the leaded pipes. And I'm like, wait, 10 years of having to shower with bottled water, cook with bottled water, drink only bottled water. Like, how did that 10 years? And then we've got other places too where, the aquifers are becoming too salinated because they've dropped so low and you're right next
Mhm.
to, it's wild. It's so wild. And
Very
yet
American.
yeah, it's a super American issue, but you find a way to write about all of this in ways that I found super interesting, but also super relatable. Like, they were interesting enough because I was like, huh, I didn't know this about this place or these people. But at the same time, I was like, oh yeah, this sounds familiar.
Right.
And I
Right.
don't spend a lot of time in the South. I mean, I've been in and out of the South, sure, but like, I spend a lot of time in California. I spend a lot of time in New York State. I spent a lot
Mhm.
of time in New England, but all of this to me is recognizable. Even, California, like, we got some
Yeah.
stuff going on there too.
Right.
Uh,
Well, I mean, the whole argument of the book is that, well, one of the arguments is that everything that happens in Alabama is what's happening in the country. It's just more extreme down there.
mhm. Well, I mean, voting rights.
Yeah.
I mean, you have had a complicated relationship with voting rights and who's been able to vote and how they've been able to vote.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's kind of fascinating
Hmm.
to an outsider watching what people go through in order to be able to vote, and they still show up.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't send people away. They're just like, of course I'm going to stand here until I have to stand here to get, which, yeah, the photos are great to see in a way, but at the same time, that's also voter suppression.
Right.
Like,
Right.
we still haven't quite figured out the language
Right.
to use to describe everything that's going on.
Right. Right. On the one hand, it's sheer that will again, that sheer
Hmm.
will. On the other hand, it's like, why should it take so much will? How do we make it easier?
You still feel hopeful. I mean, having read the book, you strike me as still being hopeful, though, about the place and the people. That you haven't thrown up your hands and said, "Oh, this can't be saved." It's more like, "No, no, we'll get there. It's going to be messy, but we'll get there." And I quite enjoyed that.
Yes. Oh, that's a perfect encapsulation of how I feel. Because listen, I'm a realist, and I
Hmm.
think in the book I'm extremely honest about all of the state's failings, but I also think it's come through a lot, and it is what it is because of all of these competing visions and push-pull for the state, and that's only going to continue. It's not over.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested to see, what happens next as it keeps going.
I mean, aren't all of us feeling that way about whatever place we live in at the moment?
Yes,
I mean,
yes,
I sort of feel like every one of us is sitting on the edge of our seats going, okay,
absolutely.
like where are we? What's happening? But I also kind of feel like you were always going to do this kind of work. I just, having now read about you as a high schooler and all of your debate classes and that fancy debate thing that you did that I didn't even know, debate was not my thing. I talked a lot, but debate was not my thing. But wait, can you explain the fancy debate thing you did? Which you're like, it's kind of like acting, only not, because you have to sell someone on a story. And I'm like, I'm sorry, if you can do that as a teenager, you are clearly in the right line of work now.
That's a good point. It was called Speech and Debate. And I was more on the speech side. The debate was very hardcore. The speech, so there were different categories. Extemporaneous speaking, which I did. That was my favorite. Which was where you got a topic a couple of minutes before you needed to deliver a speech on it. And it was often something about a hot topic related to the day. Like I remember talking about 9/11 in high school.
Okay.
It was really exciting because, I thought it was, so much of, I think Southern politics today is all about sort of presenting a case, trying to convince people of it. And I think I'd seen a lot of this growing up and thought, this is the way you have to move through the world. And speech and debate was like a encapsulation of that.
I mean, rhetoric and propaganda, they are siblings. There's a very fine line between let's hope you can recognize rhetoric and use it wisely and then understand what propaganda does. It's not just semantics. It's really not just semantics. But I love the idea of teenage you finding your voice in a place where, coming from a northern perspective, you're a Black teenage girl. Totally. And you're still finding your voice. I mean, you have access to education. You have your parents are both professors. You have a really active social life and a church life. And because social life and church are basically the same thing, right? Like, I mean, church night, Wednesday nights, then you've also got Sunday, then you've got all the other activities. I mean, it's just your social life. And here you are, like, learning to have a point of view and defend it. It's just charming. I think it's great.
No, I love it. And I wanted to include it because I think that's why I was so shocked when I got to college in New Jersey and people were so surprised that I had a voice. Right. Because it's assumed that I must have gone through hell and high water just to make it there. And I thought, no, Alabama's not perfect, but I'm sure it's like where you grew up, where there were good things and bad, but I was able to, grow and learn about myself and find myself. And it's like we were talking about earlier, realizing that a lot of the things I learned as a girl growing up are still with me today and influencing how I think about the world and how I see it.
I mean, I integrated the town I grew up in. My mother and my brother and I were like, hi.
Really?
Yeah, no, my dad's a white guy. And it was just, hi. Yeah, it's us. And I still have people there and whatnot. I'm glad I got to live there and I'm glad I got to go to school there, and I'm perfectly happy to wave as I pass on the highway now. And it was, again, great childhood, got to do lots of very cool things and got to know some very cool people who I'm still close to in some cases, and in other cases I'm like, yep, not for me, thanks very much.
No, absolutely. And I read in my first book, I mentioned it's about a totally different topic. It's about Africa, but I mentioned in the beginning that not long after we first moved to Alabama, I was driving in the car with my brother and my dad, and a woman at a gas station shouts out the N-word, my dad. And then he pulls up to the gas station and he asks her what he said, and it's a whole thing, what she said, it's a whole thing. So that was our welcome in a way. But then later there's me in high school thriving at like a speech competition. So it's, these juxtapositions of that happened, but then also this happened too.
I don't necessarily also want to separate my adult self from anything that came before. I mean, yeah, I don't think any of us misses adolescence all that much. But in the grand scheme of things have been pretty grand for me, and I can't, yeah, I mean, there were some awkward, weird moments, but I really can't complain
Yeah,
about
same.
how I got here. And to be aware of that kind of privilege is
Mhm.
not necessarily something we know when we're doing it and we're coming up in it. And, our parents are poking us and saying, stand up straight. Or, don't say like. That was a big one in my head. Don't say like. Okay, whatever. Sorry. But to move with that kind of privilege and fluidity, right? Like you and I got to be in spaces that, you know, some of them
Right.
were great and some of them were like, quickly can I leave? Which gets us to where we are now, where we get to talk about, books and words and ideas and reporting and all of this kind of stuff where it's all story.
It's all story. And it's funny because when I was growing up, there's nothing, of course, more than I wanted them to belong. But now I see how great it was to have been what I call
Yeah.
an insider outsider,
Mm-hmm.
that I was in it, but I was also different. And that perspective is like meant everything as an adult.
Is that how you became a reporter?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, if you think about, I mean, there are easier ways to tell stories. There are easier ways. I mean, you spent a lot of time reporting in Africa, which is not always an easy place to live, even in the present day, and really digging in on stories that not everyone wanted to tell you. And you were like, hi, I'm going to get you to tell me the thing.
Right.
I mean, there was the cult.
Yeah.
I
My God.
mean, the cult piece, not an easy, I'm going to just assume not an easy piece to report.
Right.
But I love that you did it and I appreciate being able to read it.
Yeah.
What do you think is next, though? I mean, are you going to keep just sort of doing the reporting and writing books when you sort of feel like it, or
Mhm.
what does the next thing look like for you?
It's interesting. So this book, which of course includes reporting, but expanded to memoir, expanded to
Mm-hmm.
history, and I feel like is actually quite more creative than my first, which was more
Mm-hmm.
reporting. I think it's pushed me on a creative bent, and I'm
Cool.
actually thinking about the next book being a novel,
Oh,
uh,
good.
loosely based on experiences abroad.
Oh, excellent. I'm very
Yeah.
pleased. I mean, listen, I love reading reportage. I really do. Like,
Mhm.
and even, stuff that you get from the sort of 30s and 40s and 50s. I just, I think good journalism done well is the prose is really good. The narrative pacing is really good. That's like I could read a short story or I could just read something. And obviously, the New Yorker has been the home for this for a really, really long time. And or if you look at like how we've covered wars or how we've covered smaller conflicts or how like just how we look at the world, right? Like that filter has come from books and magazines and then eventually television. But like if you look at how people were sort of responding to the world early on, can we talk about influences on you and your writing style though?
Hmm. It's interesting. I think probably a very clear one because I mentioned her in the book
Mm-hmm.
is Joan Didion
Mm-hmm.
because one of my goals in preparing for this book was reading books about place,
Yeah.
pieces about place. I was like, how do you tell your because this book is about who gets to tell the story of
Mm-hmm.
the place. And I wanted to see how people told the story of their places. I love
Yeah.
Jodine's book about California.
The Sacramento book, right? The one where I'm blanking on the title. Oh, this is really bad.
I should know this because
Where I'm from. Yeah, where
yes.
I'm from made me want to go to Sacramento. I don't.
Yeah.
I really don't actually need to go to Sacramento, but I was like, what is this place? This is what? This is okay. But yeah, I really, I mean,
Absolutely. And then Larry Wright's book about Texas. I mean, Larry's
hmm,
all of his writing about Texas,
yeah.
which in a way is kind of a similar mission because he's, this is a big red state,
Hmm.
but he has with blue spots and he really delves into its complexities in a really interesting way. Um, and I feel like I'm forgetting her name. She wrote The Big Yellow House about New Orleans.
Yeah, Sarah Broom.
Yeah,
It is the Yellow House, and it is Sarah Broom,
yeah, The
and
Yellow
there are
House.
apparently 2 more books coming, and I'm
Oh, I can't wait.
quietly waiting,
I can't-
desperately, desperately waiting for them. There's no polite way to say it. Yeah, no, the Yellow House is pretty spectacular, but again, like you're talking about, like place, like to be rooted in a narrative of place means you
Mhm.
can go anywhere.
Yes.
Right? Like I can just hand myself over to you and be like, okay, take me through Alabama.
Yes.
Totally unprepared for this, but now I really need to go. I want to see all that green for myself, but I suspect, like I was just in Hartford, Connecticut for the first time, like for like a real visit kind of thing. And almost block by block, that place changes, right? And it's one of these secondary cities that you can tell, like all of this building happened in the 1800s, and then a bunch of building happened in like the 60s, and then a bunch of stuff stopped for a while. Like it's just it's this wild sort of portrait of America in like 15 blocks, and you can see it. And it's also partially because I had never really spent, like I've driven through it 1,000 times, but I'd never actually been there.
Yeah.
And now I get that place in a totally different way.
Sounds amazing.
Well, I mean, I feel that way about your book, though. I feel like I have a totally new understanding of not just Alabama, but like the modern South, right? Like the way we tell stories about the South, it gets rooted either in the Civil War or the Civil Rights Movement. And like those are the 2 options, right? And I'm like, but what about now?
Yes.
Because y'all are living with this, right? Like y'all are figuring out what the next thing looks like. Or someone like, Natalie Channon, who set up a workshop, and I think it's in Florence, Alabama, but she's like hired all of these tiny ladies to hand sew lots of things, and like that's interesting. Never would have occurred to me, but she's like, yeah, I'm from here, and I wanted to bring my community back, and I know how to have a business, and I can employ people in my community. That to me is really interesting.
Yes. No, that's it. I didn't want to write a book about the Civil War or the Civil Rights Movement. I mean, those 2 important moments.
Right.
There's so much more. It's like what is young, what is contemporary, what is interesting, what is surprising. And the idea is that, you see a lot of things that remind you of your own home. Because, the big question I wanted to answer is why people stay in Alabama. Why do people live there? You wouldn't believe how many times I've gotten that question.
Have you ever thought about going back full time?
I tell people now, and I actually do mean it, I would love to maybe retire there or something. I think it's my ideal, like, but in the country, amid the green.
Oh, I get it.
Water. Like, that sounds perfect to me.
I totally get it. Okay, that actually, like, you have to have hope for a place and hope for its people and hope for the future if you're talking about retiring to a place that you grew up in. So I'm going to take that as a really good sign. Alexis, this was so cool. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you so much for having me. I love this.
Thank you for listening. Poured Over is a Barnes & Noble production. To help other readers find us, please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.